Hi people, it's Sarkavist here, and today I'm going to be reviewing the iPhone 11 Pro. I thought this would be a good time to do this review because I've had it long enough now to do an experiential review rather than just talking about the specs, but we're far enough away from the next iPhones to where I don't have to caveat all this by saying, well, you should just wait for the iPhone 12. But if you are watching this in the future, perhaps you can get maybe a discount on it. I'm sure it's going to come down in price as new iPhones take its place. So the reason I'm doing a review for this phone, because I do not generally review smartphones, in fact I don't think I've ever done that before, is because I wanted to call out that this phone, although it wasn't the most exciting iPhone release ever, right, it was the same notch design as we've had since the iPhone 10 in I think 2017, but because they've refined it through the iPhone XS and now the iPhone 11 Pro models, it is just such a flawless phone. Now that is not to say that it is the best phone out there. It's not necessarily got the best camera or the best screen, but it just doesn't have any clear weakness. The screen is very well rounded, it's sharp, it's colourful, it doesn't have the occasional big issues of OLED. For example, there isn't a very significant blue shift which you see on some screens. The CPU is incredibly fast. I don't think I've thrown anything at this phone that has slowed it down yet. The build quality is very good, not perfect, but it is very good. The one thing that does bother me about these phones is that where you have the stainless steel meeting the glass, you can feel the sharp-ish ridges. They're not really sharp, but you can feel it. Whereas with the aluminium design, it was a very seamless, smooth curvature around the side of the phone. I don't know if anyone else has noticed that, but if you hold an iPhone 11 Pro or Pro Max, you can definitely feel the edges where the stainless steel stops and the glass begins. That is a super OCD thing to complain about, but hey, as these are so expensive, I'm going to let myself off on that one. But in terms of how they look, and they do feel super premium. But yeah, there just really isn't an area, like even heat. Like sometimes you get phones that have very fast CPUs, and indeed, although this does have an incredibly fast CPU, even if I'm playing a game like Call of Duty, which is very graphically intensive, if you turn up the settings, it never gets hot. It does get warm. There's no way it doesn't get warm. You can feel, especially around the camera, there is a bit of heat being generated, and that's only natural, but it never, even after long sessions, becomes too hot. Like I actually don't want to be using anymore because it's become uncomfortable, or I'm starting to actually sweat over the screen, which feels really awful. I have had some phones in the past that have been like that, even iPads, where they just get so uncomfortably hot that I just don't want to be using them anymore. But this seems to be, for the most part, quite cool. The speakers are, okay, so it's not a weakness because I haven't ever known a smartphone speaker to blow me away. Volume is fine, but they are going to sound tinny. There's only so much you can do. I mean, I feel like we're still waiting for that. Like, take with the MacBook Pro 16, that was almost like an oh my god moment where I can't believe a laptop can do this. But I haven't had that moment yet where I've heard the sound coming from an iPhone and say, I can't believe a phone is doing this. Yes, they're fine, completely serviceable for a phone, but they are very much phone speakers, right? I think one thing on the camera, so the camera is very good. In photo mode, it's fine. The night mode is good. But I will say, in terms of video, I don't really need 4K 60, but I really wish they would focus on getting the low light performance better in video, because even if I'm shooting in my room, for example, and it's relatively dim, there is still so much noise all over the picture. And I really wish they could find a way to make it so that even if I'm shooting in my room and the lighting isn't super optimal, that the image still looks quite clean. So if there's any area for improvement on the camera, it's that, but generally speaking, it's fine. And to be honest, I think video on smartphones in general is still something that isn't uniformly perfect anyway, so it's certainly not below average. It's just something that I see would be nice to improve. So it's a really well-rounded phone. I'd also, and this was completely my choice, I was thinking, do I want to get the 6.5 Max or do I want to get the 5.8 regular? I was never going to get the iPhone 11. I think I'm just too drawn to the OLED screen. I really like the look of the OLED screen. So I was like, which one do I go? And it's really, do I want the bigger screen and the bigger battery, or do I want to get the more compact one? And As someone who has been using plus size phones, like plus size iPhones for a long time, although I love the look of the screen, I have to admit one thing that's always been a problem, particularly in the summer when you're not generally wearing like a coat and you have to use your trouser pockets or your short pockets. The plus size phones definitely feel a bit obstructive and they look kind of ridiculous where it's got this massive slab in your pocket, and they've never really fit particularly well for me. I can really feel them getting in the way. But when I drop this phone into my pocket, like my trouser pocket, I can barely feel it's there. I can feel it's there just enough to where I don't feel as if I've lost the phone, but it doesn't feel like a burden, if you know what I mean. I think that's quite important. I think that's why we're seeing foldable phones starting to see a resurgence, because phones are getting so big now that it's like in a slightly more common attire, like a jean pocket, you don't always have, well, you have room, but you really have to, get the phone in there for it to work. I'd also say that construction integrity is pretty good. I haven't got any scratches on my device yet, touch wood. I'm sure I'm eventually going to get some scratches on this thing, but whether it be on the frosted glass back or the front screen, there's nothing significant unless I hold it under a very intense light in the bathroom, for example, where it's very, very bright and very, very intense and not representative of really many other scenarios. And then, yes, I can see some very fine hairline scratches, but that's just, I've never known a phone to be resistant to that kind of thing. But if I'm just looking at it in daylight or in a regular lighting setting, it looks completely fine. I suppose one thing I've noticed, and it's the case of any of the phones with the stainless steel band, is that they so easily pick up that grease or sweat from your fingertips. Like even if you've just washed your hands and they are perfectly clean, you can still get little marks on them. Now, if you sort of just scrub the side, it comes right off as well, but it does show it quite obviously, which is why I do prefer the darker colors. Like space gray was a very deliberate decision by me for that reason. I've previously used the XS Max in gold, and the sides could look so ugly if you were using it without a case and your fingers were just a little bit grimy. Like it would go a really sort of gruesome color almost, but with the slightly darker color, it doesn't show up as much. So I would say there is a good reason to use it. Plus, I think if I do start getting scratches on the stainless steel, it's going to show up a little bit less on the darker than the silver. Because when I went into the Apple store the other day, I was just looking around generally, and I was looking at all of the different iPhone 11 Pros. You could definitely see the hairline scratches most predominantly on the silver model, which would be the lightest one. But yeah, the reason I started making this video, the reason I want to talk about the iPhone 11 Pro is that it is just such a well-rounded device. And I suppose, like, I just see no reason to wait. This is as good as you will need. There's nothing about this you'll use and think, it's too slow, it's too hot, it's too small, screen isn't good enough. It's just so good. I mean, I think the one thing that, say I was buying this now, that would make me regret it, and this could happen, so this is the one thing, is if the iPhone 12 has an 120Hz screen. That's probably like my number one desire. Like, I don't consider 60Hz a weakness, it's pretty standard, and most content doesn't go over 60Hz, but that is something that I think would take this phone to the next level, or the next phones to the next level, would be a 120Hz ProMotion screen like the iPad Pros. So that's what I really want to see next. But in terms of what it's trying to do, what it's trying to be, what it's trying to do well at, this phone does not falter whatsoever. And I would consider, if you're looking between the iPhone 11 Pro and the Pro Max, do think about the portability aspect, because ask yourself, like, although yes, you want a big nice screen, is that something you really need in your smartphone? Because for me, although I came from a bigger screen, I very quickly adjusted to it, and now I'm just appreciating the more compact size. I've been a big fan of this just standard 5.8 iPhone 11 Pro. As always, people, thanks very much for watching, and see you next time.